when the anxiety came and the panic attacks, or I'm like, well, God, where are you? I'm praying for and asking for help, but it's not getting away. And in fact, it's not going away. And in fact, it's actually getting worse and worse and worse. So I started to begin to question and get almost resentful towards the situation. I'm like, God, I thought this is what you wanted me to do. Why am I going through this? Why am I, I want to help people. This is something I truly enjoy, but why am I going through this? And I think that's where I began to get frustrated, because up until this point, I was able to fix everything. I was able to control everything. And God was like, well, guess what? You're not in control of everything. And I'm going to let you go through it for a minute. And so I want you to flex some new muscles that maybe you didn't realize that you had. And you're going to have to go through it for a little bit and ask for help and accept help and do things that are outside of your comfort zone and grow.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to An Invite to Peace. I am your host, Chad Campese. How are you? Really? How are you? I would love to know. Hit me up over LinkedIn, Facebook, or probably the best way, shoot me an email, chad.campese, CAMPESE, @gmail.com. Hey, in the last episode, I mentioned a change that's coming, and just to add a bit of info to that, we have 2 episodes left as simply An Invite to Peace. Something I've learned through doing all these episodes with the questions and the feedback is, quite honestly, police officers out there aren't doing so great outside of the department. After we clock out, after we leave the shift, in so many areas, relationships, parenting, health, even finances and faith, it seems that we do one thing well as officers, and that's learn how to be great officers and how to serve our cities and our citizens well. Something we're very well trained and focused on, and even very deliberate about. But when it comes to the other things, the things that really matter and mean something in the entirety of life, families, relationships, quite frankly, when it comes to all that, well, my fellow cops and I, many of us just stink at that stuff. We suck at many things outside the time clock, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There are also many ways to focus, train, and fix it, just like we do for our jobs when we're wearing the uniform. And I'm not the expert here, guys. Just an expert in my own failures, I guess. But I do know a lot of experts, which is kind of cool. And many have agreed to share some life-changing info and help you all in our next season. More on that in the next episode. But hey, today we have Josh Howard, who went from being a pastor, yes, a pastor, to being a police officer. Pastor to police officer. I would argue those are 2 totally different views of the world. And I think what Josh shares as to what happens when not only the job and the requirements, but also those 2 different worldviews both collide, will be helpful to everyone. Not only for today, but for eternity as well. And actually, he shouts out the one thing, the one person that I keep hearing repeated over and over in all of these interviews when it comes to how they overcome the hurdles, how they get through the everyday, how they make their comeback. Don't underestimate the power of a dedicated spouse, a significant other, or a good friend in all the things that are important in life and all the things that will bring you back from whatever bottom you're at. This episode goes out to them. Friends, family, significant others, you probably have no idea just how important you are. I think Josh will convey that in what you hear today. All right, guys, my convo with Josh Howard. Josh, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you coming on, giving us some of your time. I've got some notes here. There are like 2 big questions that I want to ask you because you're a little bit of a special case here. You're a past, or however you put that, a past pastor in ministry and things like that, and now you're a police officer, so you've kind of made the leap. So with that comes some different perspectives and some different ideas. So I kind of want to get into that a little bit, but before I do that, if you could just kind of throw out there a little bit, a quick snippet of your history and where you're at right now.
Yeah, so like you said, I was in ministry coming out of college. I was a worship pastor at a church locally in Hilliard, and Just always felt the draw back to law enforcement, being a first responder. It's always something that I've wanted to do. But at the time, I was always the type of guy that there's an open door, I'm going to walk through it. And coming out of college and even in college, really since high school, I was kind of on that ministry track with music and worship and stuff like that. And so just one thing led after another. Once I got married, just trying to give you like the short version, going into marriage, I always told my wife, Ashley, like, hey, this is still something that I want to do. Would this be a deal breaker, like possibly going into law enforcement? And she's like, no, I love you for who you are, not what you do. And that was a conversation we had before we even got engaged. And so a couple years into marriage, I remember we went out to San Diego, and we just had some friends out there, and we went to the tallest mountain of San Diego and hiked it just for a fun day, and you could see a lot. And we just kind of took that as like a anniversary prayer, like what the next year is going to hold. And one thing led to another, and Hilliard police were hiring, and and I just got hired on from there. I was actually at the time a local Hilliard pastor, and they had their first line of duty death, and I was actually standing on the front step of my police department as the processional drove by, and I was just overcome by emotion. I felt called. I'm like, I don't think Hilliard has a chaplain program, so I was like, oh, this could be a really cool way to bridge the gap of a passion or a calling for law enforcement while still working at the church. And one thing led to another, and we felt called. So on that mountaintop, we had that prayer, and like, okay, this is what we're going to do. So I made the jump.
On a literal mountaintop, if I could point that out.
Yes, literally.
We all talk about, you hear about the mountaintop experiences, but this was a literal mountaintop. Yeah, literally.
The sun was shining, got some good exercise, heart rate up, and we just sat up there like, wow, taking it all in. And there's a very physical side of things, or spiritual side of things to, my faith and, our walk with God. But this was also a very, physical experience too, where we just got to experience all that, with God. And it was really, really cool to see it. It was just very clear, like up until that point where it's kind of just this gray area, I don't know, but it was like, yep, this is what we're going to do. And then once we took that step, it was kind of just like everything lined up after that.
So talk to me. You mentioned physical experience with God on the mountaintop, being a pastor. A lot of my past experience with churches and religion and faith has been the very dry, dogmatic, doctrinal, knowledge-based stuff. So do you have, that mountaintop experience? Do you have situations in your life from that you had a real experience with, hearing the voice of God, feeling the call of God when you're on that? What does that feel like on that mountaintop when you're saying, I was there and it felt like it and I could hear? And what is that? Give me a little more picture of that.
Well, you talk about like you got your natural revelation and your, special revelation. It talks about in the New Testament where, God naturally reveals his glory and himself to you through creature, through his creation. So you have that part. And then you also have the special revelation where specific, we have a personal relationship with God. Each person has their own personal relationship. And so with that, just leading up to everything that had gone on in my life, it was like, okay, there was kind of like this holy discontent. I don't know how much in the weeds you want to get with it, but up until that point, there was a lot of people that invested in me to be where I was in ministry. I led worship at Crew at Ohio State. I was involved in leading a youth band for our youth group of over 200 kids, and then got called to go help start a church in Hilliard, and I was a part of that. And I was also conflicted because I was like, God was really putting me where I felt like he needed me to be in affirming those steps, but why am I feeling this pull to go somewhere else? And I felt like I was going to let people down, by doing that. I'm going to disappoint people. Like, why would you're so gifted in this area. Why would you want to go in the trenches of law enforcement and, the things that can bring? But when I was up there with my wife, it's not just my decision, it's our decision. We're whole people coming together as one unit. And just the beauty of where we were at, and just you might be in the midst of so much noise that when you finally just stop and listen, you can truly just feel at peace and feel clarity that is so distinct from just everything else that happens, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it was a kind of combination of all that.
Now, was there any kind of backlash at all from those guys, those people that had invested in you, assumed that you were going to go in a certain direction, you planted a church, or was it all, hey, good job, we're happy for you, sending you off, you're going to do great things?
No, I think I was my own worst enemy in those moments, just building it up in my head, like I'm a perfectionist, and I'm also a people pleaser. And, I think a lot of us can be that, where you form other people's opinions about yourself for them when really they're just for who you are, and not necessarily for what you do. I had a couple people that said, that questioned, can you really be a good leader or a good father or a good husband while being in law enforcement? I had a couple people that questioned that, and that was kind of like, I was kind of taken back by that, because one, they don't know law enforcement. They don't necessarily understand that. And that doesn't mean I also had a lot of great examples of people that were great husbands, were great, fathers and leaders in law enforcement. And you don't have to be one or the other. You can be both. So there was a little bit of that, but the overwhelming majority of the people that were for me were for that step. So.
Gotcha. So Ashley's in, you're in, law enforcement is ready to go. I've got kind of a big question that comes out of that, but first take me to, what did that transition look like? You got hired onto Hilliard then just after that mountaintop experience, or what? Did you just start putting in for other departments, or what?
So when I actually met with the chief and deputy chief at the time to be a part of to try to see what a chaplain program would look like. And part of that response was, hey, why don't you be a part of our Citizens Police Academy? It's like a 12-week program, and you get to kind of know what the department's all about. And if you are going to be possibly one of our chaplains, it'd be a great first step in learning who we are and what we're all about. So I joined that, and up until that point, I wanted to be with another much larger department, and not really ever considering a smaller department, and especially one that I was already active in the community with and living in. And so through that process, while I was in that academy, or Citizens Police Academy, they opened up the hiring process. So that was like spring of 2017. And then that's when I also applied. And then by December of that same year, I was going off to CPD's academy.
Gotcha.
And so
okay.
My last day at the church that I was working at was in November, and I had like a nice little month off, just kind of get my ducks in a row for the academy. And I was sent off and prayed over front stage at church. And, so everyone understood, what was going on. I wasn't leaving in bad standing. I'm still actively, 7.5 years later, I'm still very much involved in that same church. So.
Oh, you go to the same church still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Very nice.
The church and the place I work, Hilliard, all in the same city. So
yeah,
it's kind of a unique opportunity being able to still build on those relationships and, get to know a lot of different people in the community that way.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Police Academy, doing your thing, done with the ministry for now, or the ministry, at least in that perspective that you were involved in the ministry. Law enforcement, huge difference.
I mean, I had a couch in my office. If I wanted to, I could sit around and or spin my chair around and go sit on the couch and try not to fall asleep while I'm working.
Now you're at the mercy of the police department, shift wise, time wise. I'm sure. I guess a lot of my questions that I'll have here coming up stem from, just a completely different perspective of life. I do remember, like I told Hillary, I remember, I think the first time we met, at my sister's kind of wedding festivities and all that, like she pointed you guys out and she was like, "Oh, there's the Howards. They're the Christmas card people. Like they do the videos or whatever."
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I remembered, and I met you, and I was like, that might be the smiliest, happiest dude I have ever met in my entire in my entire life. And you were just like,
Well,
nice, well-rounded, happy-go-lucky. Like, that's one of my big questions is I'm curious. Take me from that guy to now police academy on the street. I'm assuming, I don't know, how many years it took or whatever, but what
yeah,
does that transition look like from kind of a starting to see that different perspective of life, different perspective of
yeah,
work, that kind of thing?
yeah. So as I went into the academy, there was another officer that I was kind of like a great mentor, kind of like a second father figure to me. I was always doing ride along, so I got to see glimpses of it. But it's one thing to see it; it's another thing to live it. And going from a cushy office job with the couches on, in my office and stuff like that, to for the next 9 months, I'm in the academy, getting yelled at, waking up early, going to bed early, just living, breathing, all that. Not to mention, while I was in the academy, I had my first kid. Um,
That's
so,
great timing. That's great
oh
timing.
yeah, so there lots of change. And then after 9 months, then you go right into FTO and your rotating schedules during that time. And then coming out of that, I was placed on a shift with certain days off for a couple months until shift bid happened, and then was right into third shift for 2.5-ish, almost 3 years, before I started switching to different shifts. And
Real
yeah,
quick, what does that look like with Ashley? Kind of expectation wise, like, okay, I thought it was going to look like this. Was she surprised at the shifts and the work hours and that kind of thing, or was she pretty open to know that it was going to look like going into it?
you know, it, we weren't necessarily surprised, but like I said, it's one thing to talk about; it's another thing to live it out. But we did try to surround ourselves, and we actually sat down and met with different people, officers, families, um, people that had kids, people that didn't have kids that were in law enforcement before we even started this journey, just to kind of like, what'd you do? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? Type of thing. So we kind of had a little bit of a game plan and just know to be flexible. And the one great thing I'll say about Ashley, my wife, is she's one of the most flexible, go with the flow, like no expectations, but like she's not going to hold it against you if something doesn't go the way that she may have thought it went. Just
Right.
things can roll off, her shoulder really well there. So I would say the thing that made it the hardest during that initial thing was the fact that, we went from not having any other people to take care of to now we have this little child, that wakes us up in the middle of the night, or, I'm immediately thrown on to third shift. So she's doing nights by herself, and then I'm coming home and sleeping during the day and trying to adjust to that. But, she never complained really, and was just like, okay, how are we going to do this? This is only temporary. This season is only temporary. There's something we can look forward to. But that's kind of the mindset that we had going into it, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So take me into it. Ministry, Josh Howard, happy go lucky, smiley, into third shift. Tuesday,
It
Wednesday
sucked.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucked. I was honestly, that was the thing that gave me the most anxiety. It was just like, I've never worked third shift. I'm such a morning person, enjoy being around people. And, I'm like, oh my goodness. I remember the first time coming home after my very first night ever on like third shift. And it's like, the sun is coming up, but I'm going to get ready to go to bed. I remember like during roll call transition from third to first shift, people are making coffee, but I'm going to have to go home and go to bed. There was just a weird feeling, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so, and then trying to sleep and just waking up, I just felt like it was like an out of body experience for me. And, I think that some of the biggest struggle that I had was feeling like I wanted to maintain Pastor Josh, or like ministry Josh, with police officer Josh, and trying to make it be the same person and do the same things. And I found out that I ended up putting a ton of pressure on myself. And even to this day, I still struggle with that. Where trying to be there, be everything to everybody, while also trying to take care of myself. And taking care of myself is the first thing that went. I went from working out every day and exercising, I was very involved in sports growing up, to, what is working out? what does that look like? And, because I'm barely able to sleep. And I honestly remember in the academy, they talked about like the different things that you could go through as being in law enforcement and some of the physiological changes and, couch potato syndrome. Like, what is that? Well, I'm not going to just want to come home and just sit around and do nothing and just be a slug on a rug type of thing. Like, that's not me. That's not who I am. And finding myself like when I get home or when I wake up at 3 or 2 or 4 or whatever I wake up, to just going from the bed to the couch, and I'm there, but I'm not there. I'm present, but I'm not, engaged. And so at first it was just like, oh, okay, well, you're just getting used to it. Things will regulate. And I went from that to, okay, when I would flip my schedule going from, working 5 days straight to having 2 days off, I would try to flip my schedule, and then I couldn't fall asleep at night, knowing that I was going to do something with my family the next morning. And then it's 4 a.m. and I still haven't fallen asleep. And I have to get up in 2 or 3 hours, and I'm having a freak out because I'm like, I haven't slept for over 24 hours going into the switch. You know what I mean? And so something that I didn't really have an issue with started to become an issue, and I didn't know it at the time. And it all stemmed around sleep. And then when I was in work and I'm going to work, doing my thing on shift, I really enjoyed it. But then coming home and trying to deal with sleep, it became an issue that I didn't realize was becoming an issue. And I started to truly develop anxiety, but I didn't realize it. Up until this point in my life, I was very much in control of everything. I felt like I was very much in control of my body, and, lots of new things happening and working out and getting married and just a lot of newness, exciting things. And everything was at my fingertips. But then I started to feel like I couldn't maintain who I used to be, and that normalness of wake up in the morning and do your thing and hang out with people and then go to bed. And that a lot of those norms I couldn't do. And even volunteering at my church, I couldn't do because it was just, I had to take a step back. And I remember I think it was right after Christmas of 2019. So going into 2020 or 29, going into 2020. So right after Christmas of 18, I remember kind of coming down with something. So I already wasn't feeling well. And I just remember waking up, or maybe I didn't even wake up, but I tried to fall asleep, and I'm like, why is my chest hurt? I'm like, oh gosh, like, why am I feeling really hot? Why am I shaking? Like, and I remember, I think it was about like 1 a.m. because I started like panicking. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was starting to have a panic attack. And my wife wakes up freaked out, trying not to wake up our daughter in the other room. And she immediately called.
You'd never had one before?
No. And so everything was starting to come to a head, like this shift work, obviously there's things that you see on the job that you've never seen before. And then not sleeping, putting a ton of pressure on myself to be there for my family in the same way, in the same capacity that I was pre-police, to the point where, oh my gosh, what's happening in my heart? What's happening in my body?
Yeah, it's
she immediately
interesting.
called.
I was going to say, you mentioned a while ago before you mentioned you're a people pleaser, which shocked me because I can't tell you. I mean, again, cop for 23 years. I know a lot of cops. People pleaser is not a line that I would use to describe any of them. That's kind of not something you have in this line of work, as far as that conflict, I guess. Kind of that's a huge part of your anxiety, or what does that look like going into?
Well, it's not so much that pleasing people, I guess, seeking approval of and seeking affirmation of, and and out of that stems, like, I'm going to go above and beyond to be loyal, and above and beyond I'm going to show you my loyalty and my love by serving you in ways so that I can receive that affirmation of like,
gotcha.
You know what I mean? And so, in my mind, I got to maintain all these relationships. I got to maintain just the same rhythms that I was going in doing before I became a cop. And now I'm on a third shift schedule dealing with trauma and critical incidents and just crap and now I'm not sleeping, and just it became a downward spiral.
Is
And
there one thing specifically on third shift, one call that sticks out in your mind those years that really kind of brought you to a realization like, holy crap, I'm in it now. I'm an officer. This is what happens. This is real.
In Hilliard, we don't get a ton, but I just think the repetitive imagery of seeing dead bodies, and just like the realization of death, and not really experiencing that before, other than going to a couple viewings at a funeral, a couple here and there, and just I think that I did a good job compartmentalizing it. We talk about different ways of coping and whatnot, and just kind of putting it there, but you just kind of put it in this basket and move on, and I'm fine, you know what I mean? So I don't think it was any one thing at that time. I think it was just, like you said, I was doing one job, being a pastor at a church with a couch in my living room or in my office, to dealing with all these things, shift work every single day. And not only that, but just the stress and the pressure of making sure I get through FTO, and making sure I get through probation, and all these things so that I can provide for not only my wife, but now my newborn, and all these things. And I put a lot of pressure on myself. And then when I wasn't sleeping, it became very irrational with sleep, and just like, well, what happens when I don't fall asleep? And just my wife called one of my buddies. He came over at 1 a.m. and took me over to another buddy's house, and we had a big powwow and just worked it out in that moment. And then that led to me eventually going to my doctor, and figuring out that maybe I needed to take medication, and I was more scared of taking medication than I was anything else. And we can go down. There's things that were in my mind just from the job of taking medication, of dealing with other people that were in mental health crises, and seeing the medication they took, and what, I'm going to start taking some of that medication. Like, I don't want to be. I'm not like them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was very.
Talk to me about, and this is kind of one of the big questions I had on my list since we've kind of already gone there. But you have Pastor Josh on one hand. I'm assuming with that kind of that kind of mindset, coming to police officer Josh. And I know Hilliard. Hilliard's more of an affluent area, suburb of Columbus, but there's also just like Westerville, there's some areas of Hilliard that aren't so nice. So, what was there any situations there, or any times, or just any of your overall viewpoints of faith, looking back at God, what you believed about God, that you had one vision of how the world worked at one point in your life, and then you're kind of put into another vision of, oh, this is the kind of the behind the scenes that I haven't got to see ever, because I've been in this kind of pastor role, and now I'm in somebody's house doing X, Y, and Z, and they're going through this. Did that affect your faith? Did that affect how you saw the world at all? Did you have questions about that kind of dug at you, or that you had to deal with God on? Or
I think the biggest thing for me in my faith in that regard was kind of like growing up in a Christian school. I went to a Christian school in middle school, high school, and all that. And where in one instance you're around it all the time, and then the next instance I'm not. If I don't put any effort into it, then it's not going to be there. So I struggled with that. And then especially when the anxiety came and the panic attacks, where I'm like, well, God, where are you? I'm praying for and asking for help, but it's not getting away. And in fact, it's not going away. And in fact, it's actually getting worse and worse and worse. So I started to begin to question and get almost resentful towards the situation. I'm like, God, I thought this is what you wanted me to do. Why am I going through this? Why am I, I want to help people. This is something I truly enjoy, but why am I going through this? Like, I want to be able to be there for my family and be there for my kids and all those things. But nothing was working. And I think that's where I began to get frustrated, because up until this point, I was able to fix everything. I was able to control everything. And God was like, well, guess what? You're not in control of everything. And I'm going to let you go through it for a minute. And so I want you to flex some new muscles that maybe you didn't realize that you had. And, you're going to have to go through it for a little bit and ask for help and accept help and do things that are outside of your comfort zone and grow. And so,
how did that look from your perspective, obviously, but now you have a newborn, or maybe not so much a newborn anymore, a couple months in, Ashley's there. We hear about Josh and he's going through it. Clearly they're going through it right alongside with you. What did that look like on Ashley's end of, oh boy, what is this? This is all
she
new.
was scared. Oh yeah, she was definitely like scared and worried and concerned, because this is not Josh. Like, Josh doesn't go through this. Like, what's going on? Like, and there's only so much you want to bring them through with telling them with what's going on. And she finally got to a point where he's like, I know you're trying to protect me, but like, I'm in it with you. Like, I don't need to know every single gruesome detail or whatever you might be going through at work, but at least I need to have some sort of like parameter or litmus test of like where you're at. So it's not all of a sudden you're waking up freaking out in the middle of the night because you're having a panic attack because everything's boiling over, if that makes sense. And,
oh yeah.
And so she definitely took her through some hard nights and hard moments, to where she wanted to help, but she didn't know how to help. She tried to find ways to help by calling other friends and people over and stuff like that, which ended up, being helpful. But then she realized, like, what you're going through is not because you're necessarily this type of person as, mental health person, but like, you're going through a very physical thing. And like, when I had a couple more panic attacks from that point on, I think I had like 2 or 3, and realizing how physical it was, and like, okay, all of a sudden it just passed and release and done. And so like, she had to sit there and ride that out with me, and that was hard for her, for sure. But then she was also encouraged, because eventually I got on medication to kind of help, and did end up going to counseling, and it was really, really good.
What was the I'm blanking for the word here. What was the thing that made you obviously you said you were worried about the medication at first. Was there somebody that talked to you about it? Was it through a friend or a family member that finally said, Josh, this is where kind of a path we need to go down compared to where you're at, or how did that change?
Yeah, it was actually another officer, peer support, but he was the same officer I did riding with in my whole life. He was best man at my wedding.
Oh, nice.
But he's father figure to me. A lot of people know him. I won't say it, but
I'll say you can shout him out if you want. Say thanks. It's up to you.
Yeah, good old Don Payton with CPD. He's a good guy.
I know Don.
Yeah.
So a lot of us know Don.
Best man at my wedding. I've known him since I'm like 10 or 11 years old. And but he basically said it this way. He's like, right now you just fell overboard. You are in it. You're in the thick of it. The waves are crashing over. You are on the water. You can't even keep your head above water. So what is someone naturally going to do when they throw, or when you fall overboard? They're going to throw a life raft, right? What is that life raft going to do? You're going to put that on. First, you're going to grab it. You're going to put that on, and that's going to help you stay afloat. So the effort goes from trying to keep your head above water to like, okay, I don't have to think about that part, right, of staying above water. Now I can have my eyes fixed on getting back on the boat. And so then the act of getting back on the boat is the counseling. The act of throwing that life raft and putting that life raft on is the medication. Right now, Josh, you need some medication just to be able to think clearly, figure out what next steps look like to take care of yourself and your body. Get a good baseline, regulate. You don't take anything crazy, but just take something that's going to help keep your head above water. This is your lifeline to stay afloat. Now, the act of getting back on the boat is counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, those type of things to truly figure out, okay, what are some of the root causes of these things? And then the next thing you realize, you're standing on the boat and you still got this life raft on, and so it was also helping me realize that this medication might not be a permanent thing. This might be a temporary thing, and I owe it to my family to take these steps so that I can get a hold of myself and figure out why the heck I'm doing what I'm doing and going through what I'm going through. And that was hard because that kind of medication, the antidepressant, anxiety medication can make you feel worse before you feel better. So it got worse before I felt better. But then I was able to start, okay, this is what the new norm is going to look like. I don't have to be that same Josh. I'm going to be a new Josh, a different Josh. I'm going to be a growing Josh. Like, it's weird talking in third person, by the way. That's weird. Or first, but I don't normally do that. But
we all understand where you're coming from. That's all right.
Yeah, but that same person was like, "This job is going to change you. It's up to you on whether you're going to let it change you for the better or for the worse." And he's like, right now, you are letting it change you for the worse. So how are you going to take steps to change you for the better? And that was my biggest fear. My wife and I said, this is a step. We're going to be obedient, and God has greenlit this journey. But if it ever got to a point where it was detrimental to our marriage, detrimental to my health, or in a long-term capacity, then it's not worth it. We will find something else. God will lead us somewhere else. But in that moment, I'm like, okay, yep, you're right. You're being my mirror. I'm letting this change me for the worse. And I'm not able to get a grip, and I'm not able to cope well with the things that I'm going through with job and sleep and all these things. And it literally came to very much a physical head to where I couldn't control my body. I couldn't pray away the anxiety. I couldn't just take a drink or go walk outside and make it feel better. Like I was like at the point where there's nothing else I can do. And so that's when, in a long story short, I started, okay, I'm going to take this medication. I'm going to go get therapy. And things started turning around at that point.
And that was that 2020 or?
Yeah. In the height of the 2019 into 2020. So basically
Gotcha.
All of 2020 was kind of that really rough year on third shift. And
yeah.
I think I hit it pretty well because when I was at work and, didn't have time to think about it that much because you just, going from call to call or, whatnot. But, but there was times where yeah.
Oh, sorry. Speaking of hiding it, kind of another one of my big questions is, I have this vision, at least of the churches I've been a part of, that on Sundays, it's kind of a show type atmosphere. There's not a lot of that, deep connection. There's not a lot of honesty between the people, that kind of thing. And that's my own stuff. And we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure.
I'm curious, you're going through all this. You're still part of the church that you left the ministry in, but still part of it on, whenever you can get there, I'm assuming with third shift. But what strikes me is it took, Dawn, who's a fellow officer and a fellow friend, to reach out to you. What did going through all this for you and Ashley look like on a Sunday morning or on the times you were able to get to church? Did people know what was going on? Were you ever sharing that, or did anybody ever ask how you were doing, or was it just everything's fine, everything's good, it's Sunday, hallelujah?
I think it's a good question because there was never any negative response from anyone at the church. And it wasn't that I was avoiding telling people at the church, but at the same time, I felt more comfortable talking to somebody instead of somebody who was at the church who may not know, who could give, a biblical response or, just I was drawn to somebody who was a police officer first and then a Christian second, because it was more about me trying to figure out, how do I live and function as a police officer? Yes, I'm a believer, a follower of Christ. However, I just felt drawn, because he and other people that are in law enforcement understand shift work, understand some of that trauma that you go through and just the physiological things that can do to your body. And it's not just like, oh, I'm going to pray that away, or I'm going to, if I read my Bible more and spend, half an hour more a day with God, like it's going to go away. Because those things are very true. And the word of God is very powerful and prayer is very powerful. I'm not saying that. But in those moments, it was, he knew me before. He also knew me before I was in law enforcement. Now he knows me
best man at your wedding. Yeah.
Yeah. And knew me going through it. And so So he was a huge help, and there was other people in the church that were my friends that knew me beforehand and that were a help too. But it was Sunday mornings too. I also long to I want to be present. I want to be normal in my mind. You know what I mean? And I want to, find rest and not bring every little thing that I'm going through to everybody at church too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I was such an external processor that I also didn't feel like I was needing it from every single person either, if that makes sense. There was people that I was actively talking to, including my wife. And so I felt fulfilled in that regard too.
I guess I wonder just if Don hadn't been there, if you weren't close with another officer, with your history, I'm assuming there were people at the church that you would have been comfortable enough in that setting to reach out to and say, hey, I'm going through this because it's X, Y, and Z. I know you're not an officer, you don't understand it, but I need to reach out to somebody, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, a lot of people make fun of me at work because they think I know everybody. And one of my coworkers says I need to carry a broom for all the names that I drop. But honestly, part of why I quote unquote know people is just being in a church community. I'm so thankful for that because having a life outside of law enforcement is so needed and so refreshing, where I can just go. I don't have to talk about police work. I don't have to talk about the calls that I went in. We're talking about bourbon. We're talking about golf. We're talking about church and God and just life as another fellow father and husband. And that's very refreshing because it's just, you need that outlet. And so I'm very thankful for that. Have that outlet.
So 2021 hits, you go through all that. Don walks you through all that, medication, counseling. Does it seem to, and you said you came out of the worst of it. What we talked about kind of your relationship with God in that, where you were reaching out, saying, why am I going through this? What's the deal? What are you doing? Where are you at? How does that kind of resolve itself, or does it resolve itself? Where does that go?
I think just like any relationship, you have highs and lows. And I think there's different seasons, and there's seasons where I'm like doing really, really well. And like you said, the mountaintops and valleys. And I think now that I've gone through that, I'm a lot more aware of what I need to do, how I need to pivot, how I need to just be real with myself and honest with myself, that if I'm not doing well, then what needs to happen. Because I finally got on that medication, and I finally, got on track. One of the biggest things was going to second shift and sleeping like a normal human being again. That was a huge step for me. Ashley's like, I'd rather you be gone in the evenings and be more of a normal human being than you getting crappy sleep and not good quality sleep. And there's some people, I don't get it. There's some people who can handle it and can sleep whenever. And I just could not nap, and I couldn't sleep well when I wasn't in my normal block of sleep, to where I could never catch up. And so going to second shift was really good for me. And then I felt like I was starting to grow and really get my footing in law enforcement too by that point, being on for 3 years. And because that's kind of when I made that shift. And seeing the daylight and everything too. And so I think my relationship with God definitely, was rejuvenated then too, because I went through it. I was refined. But I never wanted to lose sight of who I was before. And even my wife was like, do not become, you are going to change. You're going to become calloused. And that's part of, protecting yourself and growing and maturing and becoming seasoned and all those things. Like, you have to do that in some regard, not too callous, because you don't want to just become numb and not be able to empathize and stuff like that with people. However, I finally came to a point where I can breathe, and I can get to a point where not only am I helping myself, I'm aware and able to possibly help and encourage other people. as well. And, we always talk about, your own journey. There is power in your testimony and your story. And I always like to reference a passage in Revelation that we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone's story matters. Everyone's story, whether you realize it or not, is important. It's not about one-upping the other person, but with what you go through, what you don't go through. But I found that what I went through in those moments, as hard as they were for myself and my family, I've been able to use that for other people as well and prepare me to help other people, I guess. But at the same time, I'm still a human being. I'm still going to go through it. I'm still going to have times where I might relapse, if you will, with anxiety and kind of struggle with sleep from time to time. I still, from this point on, I still just struggle with sleep. I don't know.
Wait. So you mean to tell me that after 2020, it wasn't all sunshine, rainbows, and puppy dogs from then on out, and no?
No.
Oh man.
And let me tell you, it's on those moments that it's in those valleys. What you do in those valleys that make that next point even better. However, this is a journey called life. I was a part of, after being on for about 5 years, I got the privilege to go into a 5-year spot in our special investigative unit, and as a detective. And I remember walking in one morning and like 9 a.m. and I'm walking up the stairs as everyone's rushing down the stairs. And I'm like, what's going on?
Never good. That's not good.
Yeah. And I was like, what's going on? And someone just got rushed to the hospital with an umbilical cord hanging out and no baby. And so what do we have to do? We have to go to the house and look for one. And so I was a part of that team that was there, and there was another officer that I was with, and sparing the details, but helping locate where that baby was, and it was not a fun day. And so nothing can prepare you for that, and no amount of medication or prayer or that's just not a normal thing for anybody to see.
I'm assuming you found the baby.
Yes. Yeah. Me and another officer did. And so, so that was a really tough day. And I had never felt like physiological feelings from a trauma, if that makes sense. I went home that night feeling like I had the flu, like my body was achy and I had a really bad headache. And, this is weird. Like, I'm not sick, you know what I mean? But what I just went through was not normal. And so that was really, really tough. And like closing my eyes and just having imagery pop up and stuff like that. It was kind of hard for a while. And we had a cool, being a part of a peer support team myself. We had a big debrief. Peer support members from other agencies in Central Ohio came to that, and we got to process some of those things. But yeah, it was kind of out of body, surreal experience. I'm like, you just never think that you would experience that. You know what I mean? And that even affected my sleep then. You know what I mean? Because like you're thinking about that, you're seeing that imagery flashing back, and eventually that went away. Because I was able to talk through it and counsel through it and stuff like that. But again, when things are good, you got to work on yourself. When there's not a storm, there's one coming. So what am I doing in those moments where things are good to prepare myself and prepare my family and prepare people around me for those next moments? Because you just never know, and we're not in control of anything, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so that was another just like grounding moment of like, okay, things have been good, but don't rely on yourself. Don't rely on your own strength and your own intuition. You're a human being. And make sure that you have people around you that can help you, encourage you, be there for you. And make sure my faith is, I'm working on my faith and my relationship with God every day, because you just never know.
Have you had any more of those, between then and now, any more of those kind of mountaintop moments with God where going through a call or going through the marriage or going through things with kids, like you just heard the voice of God directing you in a certain way or telling you a certain thing or saying that, maybe just repeating that, hey, this is a valley now, but it's going to get better? Any kind of experiences like that?
Now that you mention it, in the midst of third shift around Christmas time, me and another officer found a family that was living out of their car, and I felt like I needed to do something about that. We can't help everybody. We can't, we might be able to initially help them with one thing. That's what we do. We get called to a problem, and we have to go find a solution or mediate a solution with parties involved. But in this moment, it was a family that, single mom, 2 kids living out of their car, bumming around different Wi-Fi locations so that their kids can do online school, in the midst of pandemic. And the other officer and I felt, which I'm not here to toot my own horn, because one thing I love about Hilliard, and I know it's not just Hilliard, is it was kind of a common practice. Whenever we felt we could help somebody, we would try to go the extra mile. And so the officer and I, we, had a relationship with a motel in our city, and went and got them a room for the night so they could just have some relief. And it was like 4 days later. At the time, it was weird. I was weird. I don't dip or anything like that. You're not supposed to do it on duty, so I won't say that. But I really liked. I was going through like a sunflower seed kick. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to this gas station. I've never gone to this gas station before to get sunflower seeds, but it's right here. I'm going to go. And I kid you not, I felt like sunflowers was God drawing me back to this same exact family, because I saw when I was walking in, just right around the corner, I saw the nose of the same car that we had dealt with 4 nights later, or 4 nights before. This car sticking out, and it was the same family. And they saw me, and I'm like, how's it going? Like, what's going on? And I don't know why, but sunflower seeds led me to making contact with that family again. So got them another room, and I ended up going and meeting with them the next day off duty, and figured out what we could do. And apparently somebody heard that, or saw, just a civilian saw that community member, saw what was going on, kind of heard what I was doing in that moment, and made a Facebook post about it. And next thing you know, I'm getting a whole bunch of people that want to help this family out. And so long story short, between people donating, and the hotel, we were able to get them basically a whole month at a hotel over the holidays.
Nice.
And the city of Hilliard, the school district, donated like 70 warm meals for them, so they could have meals for that. And then I was able to connect them. A friend of mine was a part of a mobile nurse clinic, and they were able to come directly to them at the hotel to get them more sustaining, like, things for them. Job, housing, on-site medical treatment at the hotel, stuff like that. It's like a big RV that is like a mobile unit. And then it got to the point where, with the donations, my wife, family, and kids, we got to go take them Christmas presents, off duty, and see them open those gifts and stuff like that. So that was kind of a moment where I was like, in the midst of going through it, I still felt like I wanted to be obedient to, these urges and these divine appointments, sponsored by sunflower seeds, bringing me back to them again. And that was kind of like, you know what, God was saying, like, yeah, you're going through it right now. Like, I'm not letting go of you, but I'm pulling you through this valley and these weeds and the thicket. But that doesn't mean that you still can't be obedient, and you still can't, do what you feel like you're called to do, and helping people and loving on people, and meeting them where they're at. And so that was kind of a cool, tangible moment, in looking back. In the moment, I felt like I was in a valley, but looking back, I felt like that was God saying, like, you are still blessed. You still have a lot of great things going on in your life, and you still are more than capable to help and lead and love on other people. And so I think that was a really, really cool moment for me to kind of be like, yeah, you're going through it, but I have you right where I want you. You just need to kind of go through it.
Were there any, speaking of going through
Mm-hmm.
it, were there any moments during this time, during this stretch, where you and Ashley, or maybe just Ashley, looked at you and was like, I don't know, man, this might be the point. Like, maybe we should move on from this? Or was it always she's your rock and you guys just kept going
No,
through it?
that's the one thing I've been blessed. I would say our marriage has been great through it all. However, in those moments, some of those nights where I couldn't sleep, I got inside my head. There was nights where I felt hopeless. There was nights where I felt like morning wasn't going to come. There was nights where I felt like I don't know what else to do. I never got to the point of truly being suicidal, but in those dark moments of hopelessness, I'm like, oh, I can kind of see how I could get down that road real quick, and start to have some of those ideations of like, what if? And that was really, really hard and really, really scary, and that terrified me. And talking to Ashley about those things, she's like, you do know that this is going to pass. You do know that this thought process, this act of hopelessness, the act of feeling anxious, depressed, all these things in this moment, in the darkest hours of the night, it's not you, and it's not going to last forever. And I had to keep telling myself those things in those moments. This isn't me, and this is not going to last forever. And guess what? Morning did come, sun did rise, and realizing that this isn't going to last forever, and it hasn't. And so, but yeah, there were some definitely dark nights in those moments, in that time frame, where I really struggled with that sense of hopelessness, and darkness, for sure.
So a big reason that I was excited to have you on as well was the pastor portion of that. I think a lot of times people will look at pastors and think they have it all together, think that, and sometimes look to the own pastor's peril. They project that because they feel they have to, I think. And that's actually something he brought up as well for a couple of different reasons. But I was excited to have you on because it shows that contrast between, look, here is a happy-go-lucky in ministry, doing the music, doing the youth, and then it shows that relationship with God can still come with growth, valleys, issues, and there's no, the struggles are still there, the questions are still there, the doubts can still come up. Looking back at the pastors that you were with at the church, is there a reason you think, just from your own perspective, like, did you ever feel like you needed to put that on? And I don't know what you had been through, previously to the law enforcement career, though. Were there times where you felt like, I'm a pastor, I've got to keep a happy face on, I've got to have this certain air about me around people and around, but behind the scenes, I'm dealing with this or that, and I can't really tell anybody?
There's definitely a pressure to be that shepherd, be that guide, be that example. And I don't know. I think for me, I'm such an external, like, I am what I am. I'll put my emotions out I wear it on my sleeve. Like, I think I'm up there singing, playing music, like, you're not going to necessarily, that's not necessarily the platform to say, oh, look at me, I'm broken. But I definitely, in our small group setting and, one-on-one, like, meetings with guys in our church, would share, yeah, I'm broken. I'm not perfect. But it is just like with anything, like, I think people put you on a pedestal where you have to be, because, as a pastor, they're not necessarily making you their savior, but they look at you almost like you are. And that can mess with you, and that can make you want to not mess up or show that you mess up or anything like that. Yeah, I guess.
That's what Jared was saying, that Yeah, he just said there was it's almost like there is this feeling where if pastors don't have it all together, if pastors show weakness, if pastors show that they're struggling with something or have issues, then there's this feeling like we need to get rid of them because they're not able to lead, they're not able to shepherd, they're not able
Yep.
to be honest with people, is what he said. And I
Yeah.
had never thought of that from my perspective. I'm like, because I always wonder when I was having my own issues and you see the pastor up there, like, what is he going through behind the scenes? Is he really that perfect? Is his family really that perfect or whatever?
Yeah.
But I had never thought to myself to think, well, there's a giant population of people behind me that if he did ever feel comfortable enough sharing that type of thing, that they're going to want him out because he's not strong enough to be their leader and he's not perfect, which was odd for me, I guess.
No, yeah, it's a real thing, and any type of leadership is lonely, but I would say even biblical, like being a part of a church leadership can be even more so because you're already in leadership and there's just a difference when you're a leader, like you're not one of the guys or you're not, like even from a shift level supervisor, once you become a supervisor, you're not one of the guys anymore. There's a different layer
Yeah.
added. And then on top of that, there's also, as a pastor, there's this even higher expectation that people hold than they even hold themselves of like, you are following the letter of the law to the extent of the, from Genesis to Revelation, that's how you need to live. And if you don't, then you got to find another career, another job. And then at that point, pastors sacrifice a lot to be where they're at. And then, they might not have just another secondary income or stream or, career path that could just be there to sustain their family. So there's even that real, like, well, I got to maintain this so I can provide for my family. And I can't show that I screw up or make mistakes.
A lot of pressure with
So,
that. I feel like if that, I can't
yep.
imagine that being,
And
having
then
that.
people are surprised when they do come out and make a mistake or say they have an affair or, Carl Lentz is a big one with the Hillsong New
Yeah.
York.
Yeah.
He was a big one that came out, but the crazy thing is that he came out and that happened and he doesn't work for them anymore, but he also chose to work on his marriage and he's still with his family. And so like, that just goes to show like we also shouldn't be surprised that like people in ministry are just as sinful and human as anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And same thing, you could say the same thing in, law enforcement. There's a lot of great people and as first responders and fire and police out there that are doing a lot of great things, going above and beyond anything that I've ever done or, but there's also people out there just as broken and messed up as anybody else that can easily and just as quickly taint that image and make law enforcement look dirty. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. They're on the news
So
occasionally.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So are pastors though. So you know what?
Yeah.
They're with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now 2025, not all rainbows, sunshine, but I'm assuming we're maintaining trajectory at this
Yep.
point, it seems like.
Oh yeah. And now I got two kids.
Yeah.
And having a being back on a day shift schedule with weekends off is pretty nice.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I love it, and I know I'm not guaranteed it forever. And like I say, it's a privilege because there's a lot of people that sacrifice working different schedules, and but I don't take advantage of that by any stretch of the imagination. But I definitely love that I'm back into a normal routine with doing things with my family and volunteering at my church. I still play keys, tickle the ivories from time to time. I run sound on Sunday mornings and part of a um, team there. And then, my wife and I are definitely involved in leading a small group and stuff like that. So definitely great to have that community and model some of that quote unquote normalcy to my kids and seeing that is definitely beneficial as they get older, going into school and stuff like that. So
talk to me real quick. Top, I don't know, 3, 4 things if you got an officer or a pastor or just somebody who's listening to this, who's struggling, going through something, anxiety, questions, anything like that, marriage issues, parenting issues. You're all of it now. You're a husband, you're a father, we're a pastor,
Yeah.
you were a cop. What if you could give somebody like, hey, these are the top 3, maybe 4 things that I do because I was here and then I'm kind of at a normal trajectory now as I try to focus on these 3 or 4 things to keep me even keel. What would those
Yeah.
be?
Well, I think you have to be honest with yourself. You the layering or throwing things under the rug, you just can't. You got to have a community. You got to have people around you that are going to be that mirror, that are going to tell you, you know, the real and the raw, that are for who you are, not just for what you do or for what you're fighting for. You got to have that in your life. Also, being willing to get help. You're going to have 1 or 2 moments in your life where you're probably going to be the most willing to get help. And if you don't take that advantage of that, it's going to be even harder and harder. So if you're at that point where you need to get help, just do it. Just call up a friend, call up somebody at your work or wherever it might be. If it's in law enforcement, there's peer support, or, as a first responder, but to also know that what you're going through is not forever. That was the biggest thing. I was like, oh my gosh, when I was in the thick of it, I felt like, okay, this is turning me into this, and I'm going to be this forever. I'm going to be this anxious person that can't sleep forever, and I'm going to be down in the dumps forever. No, that's not the case. But in order to get out of that, you have to take certain steps. I'm a big proponent. I'm like, don't be afraid of medication. Don't be afraid of admitting that you might need something to get help just for a little bit. If it's that life vest that's helping you stay above water for a little bit, do it. It doesn't have to be forever. You might realize you're standing on the boat now with the life vest and you can take it off. And then physical fitness, I got away from it and I started to like, okay, I'm kind of having a rough day today. Go get some cardio and go get some weightlifting in, and that actually, you feel better. Like some of the things that are so basic, you tend to forget when you are feeling anxious, when you're feeling depressed, when you're going through marital problems, like, because everything just seems like you have a glass and everything that is added to it, every drop is you're overflowing. So you're not even thinking about rational steps of what I could do because you're just trying not to make that cup overflow anymore. And so you got to stop that flow and stop making that cup from overflowing. And once you do that, then you can sit back, take a breath, and go, okay, now what? Where do I need to go from here? And but I think sometimes that hardest part is just admitting that, you know what? I remember sitting in the doctor's office. The doctor's looking at me. My wife is sitting there next to me, and they're like, "It's just a pill. It's just medication. Like, what's the deal?" And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. Like, you don't want to be what person? I'm like, I'm a human being. I'm broken. This is what I needed. And I'm so thankful that I went through that. And so having those people that are going to be there to help you. And if you don't have that person, call me. I'm willing to answer or talk to anybody that can. But having those people and taking care of yourself first before figuring out anything else is like the best thing that I would say you could do.
Gotcha. Community is important, especially with officers who like to isolate. And probably it sounds like even pastors, maybe, that it's lonely at the top. You can't be honest to people because of how they'll see you. You got to have your own community in those different areas.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else that I didn't go over? I didn't have any other big questions that I was thinking of. There was a lot of little ones, but we're over our hour time frame, so I don't want to keep you. Is there anything else I thought or you wanted to get in or thought that you wanted to say?
I really appreciate the time. I'm not a perfect human being, and I don't want anyone to think that, because like I said, we still go through those mountain tops and valleys every single day, and that's why we need community, and that's why we need each other. And I'm very, very excited that I got to be a part of this because, I want my story and to encourage other people. And so appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. So we shout it out to Don. And then so your church that you're currently a part of, you want to shout that out to anybody that's in the Central Ohio, Hilliard area that's looking for a place, or maybe some of us crusty, cynical cops who are like, I ain't ever trying to church, or I don't want to get with somebody, but maybe they want to do that on the down low with you and kind of see,
Yeah. I always tell people, I go to Movement Church. It's in Hilliard, kind of out by Bradley High School. And I always tell people, especially when I'm running sound, if you want to come hang out with me and sit in the back where no one's going to see you.
Yeah, you can leave real quick. Nobody will talk to you. Nobody will bug you.
Yep. And no one will bug you. If anything, they just think you're part of the tech team. Every church, I think, has the goal to, have a come as you are mentality, because we're all broken people. But there's a good amount of police officers that have found Movement to be their home and feel that. And there's a community of guys that are even within Movement that, we can talk to each other and kind of still have that, missional mindset of being in a church, but also, hey, I got you. I understand what you're going through at work too. And we can have those conversations when need be too, and have both perspectives in mind.
Cool. All right. Well, do you want to throw out instead of a phone number, how about maybe an email in case somebody wants to get a hold of you? Or you can do your phone number too if you want. That's up to you, I guess. But
yeah, email is great. jchoward674@gmail. So if anyone has any questions or wanted to talk, peer support member too in the metro area for Columbus. Love to talk. If you have any questions, I'll be more than willing to have that conversation. So.
All right, JC. Well, we appreciate you coming on. You know what those you just Jesus Christ is what came to my mind. That's why I thought that was fun.
Well, my middle name's Cameron, so yeah.
Gotcha.
Nowhere close.
No, I wasn't making the comparison. That wasn't it just stuck in my head. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
All right, Josh. Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
We'll see you. Friends, significant others. They can help and will make a huge difference in our lives, especially in those times that we really need them. Problem is, many officers push those relationships away. We isolate, we neglect, or even, maybe we don't even have them in the first place. We isolate for so many reasons, and we'll talk about a lot of those reasons in the upcoming episodes, and we'll provide solutions. Thankfully, Josh did not isolate, and I hope you saw how important those connections are and were to him in his situation. Because let's be honest, his situation is the same one many of us, myself included at one point, face. And that's the main thing we're going to talk about in the new season of the podcast. What happens to officers, their families, their friends, their significant others outside of the time clock? And how do we fix it? Again, more on that next week. Well, I guess in the next episode. And until then, get ready. It's coming. Many people much smarter than I are going to help you stop the bleeding and get your situation back in order, no matter what your issue is. Again, that's if you're willing to train for life outside the shift, like you trained for life as an officer. Until then, hit the subscribe button, shoot me a review, get a hold of me if you want, LinkedIn, Facebook, or email, chad.campese@gmail.com, and I will catch you guys on the other side.